Welcome! This is part 3 of my tutorials on how to make an object show. Today I'll be teaching you how to write an actually good episode. I feel like this skill is crucial if you want to make an object show good. Writing is key. But before we begin, I do want to apologize. I know this took a while, but I've just been really overwhelmed with certain things. Let's begin. So you're going to want to start by going into really any website that allows you to type on a blank sheet of paper. I don't really know how to describe it. But I would recommend going to Google Docs for its accessibility and simplicity. You're going to want to go to a blank new document. And here, you don't have to, but I would strongly recommend to write the title of your episode. So, here we have that. If you want, you can flip back between characters and your cast. I would recommend premeditating on certain ideas that you want in the episode. Not for too long, maybe for a couple days, maybe a week, just to get your brain flowing. If you don't want to do that, you could, while it's less efficient, write all your ideas down. So, and maybe stuff like that, right? So, now that you got all your ideas premeditated on, or written down, you're going to want to start by writing your episode. Now, something I would partially recommend, if you're going to list all the characters and you have a big voice acting squad, I would 100% recommend, listing the lines of, each character. Just the amount of lines that a certain character gets. So, for example, let's say this is your cast. Now you have a list of all the events, or not events. All of the lines that your voice actors are going to have to record for the characters. And then you're going to want to start by writing an intro. I'd recommend 4 to 5 spaces away from your title page. So, obviously, you're going to want an intro. You're not going to make it too chaotic unless the episode specifically calls it to do. I would recommend having something that can immediately hook the viewer's attention so they can actually stay to watch your masterpiece. So, an example of a good intro, maybe it could be from characters talking to a certain action. So, let's say DVD shoots arrow at Cracker. There, you have your hook. This should be something fast that is gonna definitely make your hook, your intro, not just a generic talking point. You're never gonna want to start with conversation in your episode unless it's specific, unless you genuinely want to, unless you have this huge idea that you can only do through the intro. While unlikely, I do strongly suggest starting with action and then speech. So now you have your hook, should be about 3 to 5 seconds, ranging in between, because our human attention spans are surprisingly low. Alright, now you got your hook, you're going to want to continue off of it. So I'd recommend character name, then you're going to want, I'm not an expert at this field. You're going to want this specific symbol, 2 dots, up and down. If somebody knows what it's called, please tell me. I keep on forgetting. Then you're going to have the action or the line right here. Speaking of action, whenever you want to show a character doing an action in your episode script, you're going to want to use this symbol right here. Again, I struggle to know what this symbol is, unfortunately. Also, just to save your time, do not do a space after it. It's just going to become a dot. Don't do it. Alright. Now, let's say you have your action. So, there's your action. Another tip that I would have, right above your line, you're going to want to do the tone, or just a tiny little tip on how you want your voice actor to sound. Just so it makes their job a little easier, which is definitely what you would want in a huge voice acting squad. I've used this tip quite a few times. It is very helpful. So, let's say speak in annoyed or angry tone. Oh, and annoyed. This is better than, let's say, angry tone. This works. I wouldn't recommend it more than the other option. You can still do it. If you want to be organized while doing your script, I'd always recommend pressing enter one time between lines so it's not all clustered up or too far apart. One is the sweet spot. Now, let's talk about pacing. I feel like pacing is a huge struggle in lots of early object shows. So, even in my show, episodes 1 through 5, not great pacing. I've only recently learned how to pace my show. And I'm really hoping that you can learn how to pace yours too. Here's how you do it. So you're gonna remember all those ideas you had. So they would logically or realistically be remembered or written down. You're not going to want to do every big scene or idea instantly. You're never going to want to do that. What you're going to want to do is to add transitions, other subplots, or conversation between characters. So, what I mean is, here, I'm going to go to Flip a Clip for an example. It's going to be very abstract. So, here's how I like to imagine an episode script. I imagine an episode like a line. You're gonna that is spiraling downhill, you're going to want it to be a smooth fall and not scene after scene after scene. You're not going to want that. Instead, how do you get this smooth line, smooth pacing of a script and not pure chaos? Let me tell you. I already said that you're going to want to add transitioning. However, if you add multiple subplots and not just huge, big scenes, or even like the smallest scenes, there always needs to be something that you need a viewer to be able to recap or remember from your episode. It's a key way to making your object show memorable. So instead of nothing here or just instantly big scene, you're going to want to have a little bit of weight, have a little bit of conversation maybe. So you're going to want to speak, then action. And you don't want to make this action too long. You don't want it to span wide unless it flows smoothly. How you flow it smoothly is an entirely different story. So, I'm a bit rusty to teaching this. I haven't taught in a while. Anyways, you're gonna want conversation, as I said, not just anything in general. Sorry. I'm gonna try to figure out how to put this into words. Oh, I'm sorry for being so vague. Okay, you don't want it to be abrupt, so you don't want your conversation at the start, middle, end of the episode. You want characters to stay on topic and then make the conversation able to go and transition to the main or a different topic. This allows your episode to flow smoothly throughout and not pure chaos between scenes. I'm not saying that you shouldn't cut to a different scene every single time. If a conversation finishes, I would strongly recommend cutting to a different scene and not letting a bunch of other subplots happen, because then you're never going to get to your point. And now I'm going to talk about bias. This is a huge issue that I see in lots of shows. You're never going to want to be biased in your show. It ruins the entire story. So I'm going to go back real quick. So here we have my cast for my show. We have characters like Globe or Milk, Sticker, like that. Notice that each character must have a personality. When I created this show almost a year ago, most characters were just background characters. You cannot have a filler character. Whenever you're trying to make a show, whenever you're making that asset for your character, you are never gonna want to only fill a quota of a cast, but fill your heart of a cast. Here's what I mean. So, every character must have a personality. Not everyone has to have an arc, but a presence. Such as, let's say, Mashed Potato. Episode 1, he was known as like that loud talker. But I do want to say, when you're deciding your character's personalities, do not use stereotypes. And I cannot urge you enough. Do not I cannot stress this enough. Do not use stereotypes in your show. Do not go mean. Do not go kind. Do not go loud. Do not just... You should not be able to sum up any of your characters in one word. You should never only give your characters one trait. And you're gonna want personality. You're gonna want a character, not an image, if you know what I'm saying. Each character should be speaking as they would, and not just as their stereotype would, as it can lead to very flat lines and dialogue as well. Another thing, if you just mess up your cast, if you just have a character in the background, do not try to put them into the spotlight by saying the most generic lines. Like, what, or can I help? Maybe stuff like that. Don't make them the person to question something or do something in a crowd that anyone else could have done. Even if it's just two characters that are able to do the same thing, I would not recommend making one or the other do that specific thing, because then they're going to overlap. All your characters must be unique. Before you ever start your show, you're going to look at all your characters. You should look at all your characters and think to yourself, do any of these characters, do I like all these characters? Do I love all these characters? Are any of them too similar? If they are, you have one of two options. Two options. One, you can try to rearrange, maybe try to choose a different personality for a certain character before actually starting the show. Or if you're feeling very overwhelmed and struggling, or just don't like the character, and you don't think there's a way to save them, it is not wrong to consider cutting them from your cast. So, now let's talk about the middle of your episode. This is where you're going to want some action. You're going to be deep into the challenge or just whatever is going on the plot. Maybe it's a mystery. Some characters may be able to catch on. Maybe it's a challenge. The characters are going to be deep in the challenge. Don't make it a complete win. Don't make one team dominate the other. Don't make it so obvious who's going to win. Unless you plan an insane comeback, you're going to want to keep the viewers on edge instead of how someone would just, have the obvious team win. Speaking of teams, when you have your cast and team making, I would not recommend putting two friends or a group of friends on the exact same team. 2 friends is fine. 3 friends is a little bit of excessive. You're not going to want more than 2 friends on the same team, especially if they're the only ones on that team. While it could be interesting, I would not recommend it, as I feel like a core part of teams is characters interacting with characters that they would not normally interact with or speak to. You want to make your teams interesting. If your team is just a bunch of friends, that could get bland really fast. If your group is a bunch of friends and you favor all those characters, then that team can definitely steal the spotlight or get insanely dry really fast. While it does make their loss feel earned, it does not work in a good way. Now for the conclusion of your episode, what you're going to want to do at the end of it, obviously, you're going to wrap it up. This is where you're going to keep your viewers at most on edge right before the end. If you do the opposite, you may start to struggle a bit. Audience retention will likely stay unless you have suspense. People are going to rather watch an intense, close battle between teams instead of just conversation. You need to make your viewers care for your characters and not just treat them like objects, which is ironic because this is an object show. Tip. Anyways, once you finally make the conclusion of your episode, only if you want, you can write an after scene. Every after scene should not be too relevant. Shouldn't be something insane dropped, because most people are not going to stick around until that part. Maybe the after scene could be a little joke between some characters, maybe a tiny conversation, but generally the after scene is where you want to keep low energy or tease something big in the next episode. Either way, you're going to want to keep your viewers invested, or just enjoy the episode in general. Don't write with restrictions, especially in things like comedy or things like just arcs in general. You don't want to go too generic, nor do you want to go too chaotic, unless your plot specifically calls it to be. Write with your heart, not with your mind. I'll end us off there. I will hopefully see you in part 4. Goodbye.